Just hold on a second here. I'm running out of battery on the greatest design in the history of design here. This is I was hoping I had enough juice to get to the go live button, but we did it. We made it on 1% for the last 20 minutes. And you can't use the Apple mouse, by the way, when you're trying to charge it. So we'll see how some of these reading. So I'm not going to even click on your good morning welcomes, I've just realized, but I'll read them. Double B, good morning, Nolan and team. Good morning, Double B. Tommy D, good morning, Double B. There we go. Tommy says, good morning, good morning. If that thumbnail is AI, then I am shocked. It's AI, I promise you. What is this? It's AI, Tommy. We got an AI image today. I really tried to get Trump and Biden on a card, but it was just too stupid. I tried, like on two separate cards, I tried to get Trump as king and Biden as Joker. Just couldn't do it. Couldn't come up with them. There were a bunch of iterations. I had a few of them playing cards together that didn't really work. In the end, this was just the simplest Trump card I could find. I liked it. Sean recommends, good morning, gang. Ben, good morning, team. Let's do Bitcoin. We're going to be doing big time Bitcoin this morning. Good morning, Breakup gang. It's a great day to mine. Thanks, Matt. Enmity, good morning, Bitcoiners. Christine, we love that you're here. Good morning, Christine. T-Dog Yo-Yo, good morning, gang. Robert, spilling the beans. We've got a sunrise, right? The sun is totally up. We're doing great here on the East Coast of North America. And Bitcoin's running. What else could we do besides have a coffee and talk about what is new? This coffee is a bit of a disappointment. I was down to no filters. So I do Japanese. I don't know if you need to call it Japanese, but I do pour over coffees, right? I have like a gooseneck kettle and then I put it into the one filter and I get a fresh, hot, beautiful cup of coffee in no time at all. And it comes strong, like I like it, almost syrupy, right? That's how I like my coffee. Very strong, very syrupy. But I was down to 0 filters this morning. So I had to use a recycled filter from my previous coffee about an hour ago. And of course, the filter failed. Nothing works anymore, right? The filter just collapsed. So I had all these things and I know how to filter it out. I did my best with a little metal, whatever you call it, for noodles or whatever, colander. Is that what it's called? Anyway, the thing that you use to strain water, it still has some mud in there, but we had a coffee, so we're good, right? We're good. We've had plenty of coffee this morning. We'll go buy more filters after this. But you're not here to hear about coffee stuff, right? You're here for the fakest news I could find. It's Moscow time, Moscow time, Moscow time. We've got some really good ones, right? These are, they get better and better. So the Biden regime plans to provide 6 million illegal migrants with free medical services, food, and housing. Well, we got the money for 2 wars. Why not all the migrants too? Just give them what they need, right? That's no problem at all. This one's pretty good. This is the Gazprom CEO, right? This is his exact statement. The Russian pipeline gas to China will soon reach the same volume sold to clueless EU before the sanctions dementia. How is this quote? Don't need to add anything to that. Now, I've got a whole slew of climate change related fake science here for you all. All right. So this one's pretty good. Bloomberg, climate science in Arctic broken as US and Europe isolate Russia. Was it because he called them dementia patients earlier? Collaboration between Western and Ukrainian and Russian scientists stopped after the invasion of Ukraine and is nearly impossible, putting vital research in jeopardy. Geez, if only those Russian and Western scientists would collaborate together, then climate science wouldn't be broken. Geez, if you needed another reason to have peace, if you needed another reason, right? Oh, this one's great. So this is 2 tweets. Okay, this is 2 tweets, one after the other. It's from Christine Lagarde, right? The whole fiat Ponzi rests on her shoulders. Her and Janet Yellen, they better get working. If it's not for them, it ain't going to work. The dog will be done. It'll be a Bitcoin standard. So Christine, this is what she has to say in this time of trouble, right? So she's quote tweeting the European Central Bank, all right? So the European Central Bank said, our governing council has decided to move to the next phase of the digital euro project. In November 2023, we will start laying the foundation of the possible issuance of a digital euro. A decision on issuing a digital euro will come at a later stage. Lagarde said, "We need to prepare our currency for the future. While we haven't yet decided whether to issue a digital euro, we're getting ready. We envisage a digital euro as a digital form of cash that can be used for all digital payments, coexisting with physical cash, leaving no one behind." All right. Thanks, Christine. That's very sweet of you. I have a few more of these climate ones. So climate activist Greta Thunberg has been charged with a public order offense after being arrested at a demonstration against an oil and gas industry conference in London, England. Oh, poor Greta, arrested again, right? Who's winning, Greta or Trump in getting arrested? Who's winning? New York Times, what would inspire climate action? Perhaps an orange sky? A show at the Blanton Museum of Art set out to consider a world where greenhouse gases turn the sky orange. Then a burning planet made it a reality. So that's what they're going for, right? Here's another one. Shut down Britain's gas network and roll out heat pumps, Sunak told. Sir John Armitt warns natural gas supply must end by 2050 if the UK is going to hit its climate targets. Now, Germany tried that, but in news in Germany today, Germany fires up extra coal unit to help in cold snap. Right, it got cold, so you need the coal. Cold, more coal. That's Germany's reality. Gavin Newsom getting busy. Despite diplomatic tension, Newsom is going to China to promote cooperation on climate change. Oh, isn't that nice, Gavin? Wow. But not looking that good, right? This is from the New York Times. ExxonMobil's Pioneer acquisition is a direct threat to democracy. So we have now direct threats to democracy in energy acquisition, just in case you're keeping track. The number of direct threats to democracy always increasing, right? We always see that. And now it's, I guess, a gas thing buying another gas thing. So that's the end of democracy. Polar bear researchers, right? Canada, you've heard about the sick polar bears. Well, we've known for a while that wasn't exactly true, right? But now we're finding out it's a little more complicated than just not true, right? Polar bear researchers hiding significant increase in Southern Bay Hudson numbers. Last December, researchers vigorously promoted a possible 27% decline in Western Hudson Bay polar bear abundance, but kept hidden the fact that adjacent Southern Hudson Bay numbers increased by 30% over the same period, right? No census. Canada, none of you were around for it, but before this Bitcoin thing, a big debate that gripped Canadians was shortening the census or keeping the census long, right? There was a long form census and a short form census. It was the big deal. Everyone was fighting over it back then, but they do not want census in polar bears. No way, no how. Not going to do it. Now, I got one more for you, and this was the best one of the day. This is from NBC News, right? NPC News. Came out with Pfizer will price a 5-day course of its COVID antiviral drug, Paxlovid, at $1,390. It's like, what is that? I don't know. It's how much of a Bitcoin? Like 3% of a Bitcoin or something. When the company starts to transition to the commercial market next year. All right. So you can get your 5-day course of COVID drugs. You can either get COVID and like chill out for a little while, right? Or you can spend $1,390 for a 5-day course of treatment. It's up to you. It's up to you, right? It's up to you. You make the choice. All right, so our theme for today is the Trump card to end World War III is Bitcoin fandom. Now, I'll always say this. We're going to lead up to some Trump stuff later. I've always said this. The greatest attack I've ever seen on Bitcoin, the only thing to come close to actually laying a hand on Bitcoin and really damaging it. And I don't mean like the Mt. Gox thing, which was a hack and had some knock-on effects and things like that. But the most effective rhetorical attack I've ever seen on Bitcoin remains Donald Trump's 2019 tweet, "I'm not a fan," right? Now, the reason why it's so damaging is because he doesn't really give you much to work with. He's not like arguing any of the merits of Bitcoin. He's not like, "Oh, I don't believe it's not censorable." In my NPC guide, the Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, I talked about the first contacts with Bitcoin, and I showed all those canned answers and how you can actually take the answer and guess at the payload and then manipulate them. Right, so that's all possible. And the canned answers are usually, oh, government's going to stop it, who's going to build the roads, it's a scam, there'll be another crypto coming along, or all these canned responses, right? So the one that isn't there because it's so rare is the Trump one, right? Which is just, I'm not a fan. It's devastating. It always was devastating, right? Now, luckily, it was 2019. There was a lot going on with Bitcoin at the time. We were running right into a market that ended up being the biggest pump that the network has ever seen. So there was a lot more going on. It was just the one tweet, right? But still, nevertheless, when he took that punch, it was a little bit like Thanos when if you remember in Endgame, all the effort that Iron Man used to inflict one bit of damage on Thanos, all that for a drop of blood, he said, right? It was kind of like that, right? Trump, it wasn't all that. He didn't have to use all this engineering and stuff, but he had to be the president. He had to take time out of his day. He had to do the tweet. He had to pump the US trash token in the same tweet, which was effective, right? And I've always said it's one of the things that made me a Biden 2020 supporter, right? In the sense that I'm not really, obviously, for Biden. I was for whatever was good for Bitcoin, but I always said that Trump at the helm of the US dollar made the whole project, the promotion of it, much more effective. It literally, to me, in my mind, delayed Bitcoin's timeline, having Trump there successfully pumping the US trash token the way he did. And the way he pushed against Bitcoin was something I hadn't seen before. And I can still say to you, it is the most effective attack ever, rhetorical attack ever, right? Just the idea of not being a fan was new and difficult to deal with. And it's just Trump at his best in some ways, right? So you got to give it to him. Now, we'll talk about Trump more in a second, and that's our theme. But we'll start with the Vivek Ramaswamy, who's challenging Trump for the Republican nomination. So Vivek yesterday went on to Tucker Carlson's show before broadcast. He had about 4 million views so far, and it was published last night. So that leaves him about 1/100th of the Javier Milei, the Argentine president. Isn't that vote coming up in a couple of days? Aren't we right around there? Anyway, that's going to be big news when we get to it. I think that's this weekend, maybe. But I'm not sure. I haven't checked the date in a while. So, but still pretty good numbers. And it looks like it got a lot of amplification, and people are talking about it this morning. So he goes on there, and he had some really good points, right? And what he did talk about was the difficulty that Americans are experiencing in discussing, talking about whatever you want to call it with this Hamas-Israel thing, right? So he's been getting pushed back by the neocons, right? Because he's been saying, hey, what's going on here? So when he went on Tucker, it was really all about that, right? And they talked about, I took some notes. What they talked about was the tolerance for debate around the 9/11 time, right? 20-something years ago. There was no tolerance for debate. And basically, if you didn't jump on board going to kill people in Iraq, somehow connected to what was going on with bin Laden, then you hated America and you weren't a patriot and blah, blah, blah. So they got right into it on that. And so here's one of his tweets, right? So they talked about 9/11 and the $6 trillion price tag that came with, along with thousands of American lives fighting wars and ill-defined objectives in Iraq and Afghanistan. So his whole point was to sort of say to Israel, these are the things we learned from 9/11, right? This is what we learned when we had this knee-jerk reaction and things went that way. So he said, now we're at risk of making the sequel, a ground invasion into Gaza with no clear plan as a recipe for a prolonged no-win war that will be bad for Israel and bad for the U.S. If the U.S. is going to fund this war now or backstop it later, it's vital we understand the objectives and likelihood of success now. Here's what's about to play out. 1, Israel mounts a ground invasion of Gaza imminently. 2, Hezbollah strikes Israel from the north, making good on its threat for Israel crossing the red line of invading Gaza. Once Israel is in a two-front war, the U.S. is effectively forced to engage militarily. Iran-backed militias in Iraq Yemen attack U.S. targets in the Middle East, making good on their threats to use if the U.S. engages in Israel. 5 civilian casualties in Gaza cause other countries to turn their backs on Israel, while radicalized Palestinians back Hamas 2.0 to fill the leadership vacuum in Gaza. So a pretty accurate prediction here, I'd say, right? I don't think there's much that is science fiction-y in what he's saying. Now, the point of putting this stuff down on paper and saying it out loud the way he did was to help block this entire conversation. It doesn't look like anyone is trying to imagine and predict what are the consequences. Everything seems to be just in the present. You even saw one of the examples he used in the interview was one of the Israeli generals who basically was just saying, I don't even care what the consequences are. I don't care, right? Like I used to care. Things have changed. I don't care. I just want to go and kill people in Hamas, and that's it, right? So, and you can understand why people think that way. It's not that it's not there, right? So he talked about proportionality, of course, and that's what's got everyone upset about Israel, right? Their force to deal with this is up to their discretion. There isn't really a counterforce other than global media perceptions and things like that, which are already difficult to even characterize in one way. It just looks like complete chaos and complete confusion out there. So he came up with his own plan, right? It's not really what we're going to be talking about today, but it was a reasonable plan, right? Like, who are the top people in Hamas? Go kill them. America can give you an iron dome of diplomatic cover to do that, right? If it's just kill these 100 or 1,000 people, America could absolutely supply Israel with that, with the leeway to do that and the cover to do that, and can sort of make things fine. One thing they did talk about was a little bit around Saudi Arabia and nuclear energy, which I don't agree with what they were talking about. They were saying they were talking about the ability of Saudi to get a carve out for the nuclear proliferation deals that America has offered them in the past, which is, so this is something I didn't know. When I saw China intervene to make the peace deal between Iran and Saudi, there was nuclear technology attached. I was under the impression that that Americans never even gave Saudi the option before. Turns out they did, but the only options they'd given Saudi before were to have inspectors in the place and to make sure that it remained for civilian use and for energy uses, not to be weaponized and turned into a missile. And Saudi was not willing to do that. So apparently before this war, there was a deal getting cooked up by the Biden administration to give them this new carved out nuclear deal that would take away the weapons inspection stuff. Now, they said, no way, don't do that, right? I'm a little more, a little different on that. I'm sort of okay with Saudi king getting nuclear weapons even, right? But that's just me. I haven't thought all the things through. Maybe my idea is completely insane. But I think they should be running nuclear reactors, and I think they should be able anyway to create nuclear weapons if they want. But that's just me. Now, I don't want to be casual about nuclear weapons, right? I don't want to make it sound like they're not dangerous, but I think if we're going to be honest with the Saudis, we've got to give them enough discretion to ruin their own lives, right? But that's the reality of that part of the world. Their neighbors in Iran have them, or are at least going to have them very soon if they don't already. So you could understand why they'd want them. So I didn't quite understand what they were talking about or agree with them on that one. But here's the big thing he talked about, right? How this culture of fear has now gripped in talking about this problem in America. Just talking about it. When he calls it as the mosquitoes on the elephant's tail, it's just all these people on the periphery, right? It's like colleges, oh, what are the colleges saying? They're done, they're finished. What about donations to colleges, right? It's all these things that aren't really the issue. What we're really missing out on talking about here is the intense amount of brainwashing and censorship that's going into the entire debate on all levels, and the intense amount of spin that make it almost impossible to even get your bearings about you. We talked yesterday about the hospital situation. Remember the hospital? Well, it turns out the hospital thing looks like a total and complete scam, right? Now, I don't know exactly what's going on, but it doesn't look like a bunch of people have died. But I could still be wrong, right? It doesn't really matter in the end. The damage is done in the sense that people have had the conversations, they've been yelling at each other. We're, days into people not agreeing and thinking everyone else is spinning and lying. I've got the quote here from Robbie Starbuck. Where did I have it? I'm sure I just copied it. So this is what he says, right? So he comes out, and he's a pretty good follow on X, by the way, if you don't know who he is. So he comes out and says, geez, I'll have to get it here. Here it is. Okay. So he comes out and says, so after all the drama yesterday, it turns out the Gaza hospital wasn't bombed. The parking lot was, and 500 people didn't die. Oh, and the rocket wasn't from Israel. It was from a failed rocket the Palestinian terrorists shot at Israel. Absolutely insane. Now, it looks true, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, I know, and now we know what happened in the hospital and da 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 da. I still don't think it matters what happened in the hospital. Either way, you were going to get that story. Either way, you were going to get some story, and you're going to get another one. Bunch of innocent people are dead. Oh, you have to change all your points of view. You can't talk about it. It's all now black and white. It's very simple. We all have the answers. Do this or do that, right? So what he's saying here is this culture of fear in talking about the real issue has overwhelmed people, and they're just talking about proxy issues and what about the colleges and why are there so many people that are for it, and what about the kids and all of these things. And what he says is it reminds him of the reason why he got into the campaign in the first place and decided to run for president, which was the George Floyd summer of 2020, right? Now, it's funny because I still talk to people about this time in America, right? People always ask me, like, why'd you leave New York City, right? Why'd you move out of New York City? Well, I'm a refugee from New York City. I didn't move out because I was like, yay, I can't wait to go to other places. The COVID is so boring. I didn't even leave New York City for COVID. COVID was done in New York City. If anyone who was there remembers, May 2020 in New York City, there were no masks. No one was telling you to wear a mask. There was no masks. I escaped from New York City that summer in July, and the minute I went upstate and people were like, where's your mask? I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Masks? What? No, I'm a survivor of New York City COVID. I'm not fucking wearing a mask. Like, I don't care. And when I got to Canada, it was even crazier because they hadn't really been through what we had been through in New York. We went through the maximum amount of anxiety. Now, I was in a bit of a different position. I had all kinds of really good information sources coming in. I had Balaji Srinivasan because of the involvement with the event. So we were getting direct information from him at CoinDesk and Consensus. I already knew I had COVID in January of that year. The symptoms were clear. We knew in New York City in January 2020 that COVID was around. I still remember to this day, I had COVID that January and knew it was COVID. And had I gone on the subway, I was risking a fight because already in 2020, if you were on the subway and sick, someone was going to say something in the New York forthright way and you could end up in a fight. Like, that's how bad it was. I remember staying home and I was really busy just before a trip. And I was like, well, I don't want to risk the scene. I didn't have a long subway ride to Midtown. It was like 15 minutes from my house to my office, but still going on that train was enough to get you in a fight back then. It really was, right? So people knew what was going on. If you remember when they had the Chinese New Year in Chinatown that year, you were a racist if you didn't go because everybody already knew about COVID. And there was a ton of people saying, I'm not going because it's full of COVID there. That's back when people still associated it specifically with China. So this is January 2020, right? So when I left New York in July, it wasn't because of COVID. I didn't care about COVID. Like, I was over COVID. The month of May, when no one was around New York City, was New York City for locals, I used to call it. I used to just drive my car from Brooklyn to Central Park and just have a picnic in the middle of the day. Like, could you imagine any other time in the history of New York City just doing that? Like, just casually saying, hey, you want to all drive across this bridge and go to Midtown Manhattan and just park wherever we feel like, and then go into Central Park and just like casually chill out and have a picnic? That was never possible ever in New York City, except for that 1 month. For that 1 month, you could do pretty much what you wanted. I went out, we rented a hotel on Memorial Day that year, which is the last sort of long weekend in May. This was just before George Floyd, which was the week after. We stayed out on Long Beach, Jones Beach on Long Island. The hotels were running, people were out everywhere. There were not a mask in sight. You could walk through the hotel up to your room and no one asked you to put a mask on. There were no masks, right? Because it was New York City. We were over it, right? We were just simply over it. The re-brainwashing hadn't happened yet, right? The re-brainwashing definitely came, and New York got psycho for masks afterwards. But that time there was just no thinking about it. It wasn't really around us. But what I remembered happening, and the reason why I left, was the George Floyd stuff. I mean, they burnt my whole neighborhood down. It was gone, right? And so the thing that I remember to this day is I would tell people when I would say, "Oh, I left New York City that summer," they'd say, "Oh, COVID." I say, "No, it was not COVID." And I said, "Why'd you leave?" I said, "Well, the George Floyd stuff." And they'd say, "Well, what are you talking about?" And I'd say, "Well, did you not see they burnt the city down? Like you can't go outside. Like it's just all burnt down." They had stolen, I don't know how many fireworks, right? I don't know how many fireworks. I'll never forget it though. The month of June in New York City, the month of June, on every street in Brooklyn for 2 weeks, 3 weeks leading up to July 4th, every night was about $100,000 worth of fireworks going off all night long. All night long. It was just never stopped. It was a type of psychological torture. The fireworks were enough to get me to go. They had burnt some streets down not too far. Then finally, all of my bodegas were burnt, and there was nothing to do anymore. I couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't just order Uber anymore. That was all finished. I remember a family member calling up my wife saying, "Hey, I forgot your birthday. Can I order you some sushi?" And I was like, "Sushi? What are you talking about? Sushi? Like, there's no sushi restaurant here anymore. That's long gone." Like they burnt that to the ground. The sushi restaurant is a charred hole on the street. Like, and it was. Most people didn't see any of this stuff. That's the thing that stuck with me, is that when I left, no one even knew what I was talking about. And I said, no, but the whole street was burnt to the ground. There isn't a street there. There's no more stores. There's no more places to shop. They're all gone, right? They're just boarded up and gone. I remember taking my kids on a bike ride into across the Brooklyn Bridge. I have like one of those, almost like a ice cream, street vendor. Like the front of the bike is a big it's a 3-wheel bike, so the front has 2 wheels and a big bucket, and I can put both my kids with seatbelts in there. I don't like riding with the back in New York. It's very dangerous, so I had them in the front, and we biked, and I can still remember my daughter, who was not 3 years old, almost crying when she saw the city, how bad it looked with everything burnt, and just saying, "I don't like that. I don't like that. It's so ugly. I don't like it," right? She had no idea what was going on. She was just saying she hated the way it looked. That's how bad it was, right? Imagine not quite 3-year-old kid can tell you in full sentences they don't like what they're seeing, and it looks ugly and scary, right? And that's what it looked like. So he goes back and he says exactly that, right? He says that Vivek goes back and says exactly that. The reason I got into the campaign, the reason I started this in the first place, was seeing the self-censorship and the inability to talk about anything that went on with the George Floyd summer in any constructive or positive way. It's just a bunch of binaries and good guys and bad guys. And if you're not on our side, you're a bad guy, and da da da. And he said this ability to even have a conversation about the subject in 2020 is exactly what he sees again today. And he meant it in the context that, he's getting attacked from all sides from the Republicans. They all hate him now. They all think he's, hates Israel and loves Hamas and blah, 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 right? And all he's saying, first of all, his plan is to literally endorse a complete offensive without any possibility to get out for the people who perpetrated what went on in Israel from Hamas, right? So it's pretty clear he's for, some form of retribution. And I think in the interview even says it's needed, right? You must do this because of how bad the thing was. I think most people are there, right? I think most people can see that. So he says this whole thing is the same, right? Now, luckily, yesterday we had the leader of Hamas who basically confirmed this, right? This is what he said. The leader of Hamas did an interview, and they were trying to push him on some of these questions, right? They're trying to say, well, they're so bad, and everything Hamas did is the worst, which we can agree with. But here's what he says, right? The Hamas leader says, "I want to take this opportunity to remember the racist murder of George Floyd. The same time of racism that killed George Floyd is being used by Israel against Palestinians. Hamas, BLM, DSA, decolonization, it's the same bloodlust." Right? It is. It's the same thing. That's why when you see Cernovich constantly talking about the pogroms coming to America, he's over the target, right? He's over the target. It looks to be the same thing. It's the reason why I'm writing the book on Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management, right? We need some form of some system to actually increase our odds of surviving and our odds of not getting caught up in a pogrom, and to reprogram these people who, I say right in the beginning, this book's a survival manual. These people, if they're told and they're hypnotized to kill you, they're going to kill you, right? They might be the nicest people but they're under the spell of hypnosis. They'll do whatever you say, right? They have a type of mind virus. And that's where you can see all these stories with the hospital and all that stuff, where you can actually see the mind virus at play. Gad Saad, who wrote the book, The Parasitic Mind, right, said the following. Did anyone who rushed to blame Israel for the firing of the rocket that landed on the Gazan hospital change their minds as to the source of the firing subsequent to today's presented evidence? If yes, please comment here. I'm interested to see if people change their opinions in light of new incoming evidence, right? So he just wants to see if people actually make decisions based on facts, which we all know the answer to that. They don't, right? No one was like, oh, a new fact came in, I'm going to change my opinion on what happened in Israel. Now I say Hamas is really bad, right? That never happened. That's never happened in the history of the world. Human minds don't work that way. David Deutsch picked up on this, right? We love David Deutsch. David Deutsch is the one of the first quantum cryptographers in the history of the world. He is the fella that came up with the definition of reality that I think is most accurate, right? That reality is just hard to vary truths, right? So anything that's hard to vary and is entropy resistant is closer to reality than anything else. So I continue to use David Deutsch's explanation. I've mentioned you many times, David Deutsch is the guy that Tony Stark references in Infinity Endgame, right? The Deutsch equation or whatever, when Captain America comes to ask him about time travel. So this guy is kind of a celebrity intellectual. Some people say he's got one of the highest IQs in the world. He is a professor at Oxford. And here's what he says here's quote tweeting Gad Saad. He says, "The pattern is to deny the evidence because the original lie is too delicious as a means of legitimizing hurting Jews. I doubt you'll see many mea culpas because everyone who seized on it had a pre-existing compulsion to do so and still does. It doesn't have to stay like that," right? And he goes and says, the pattern was the same long before woke stuff and social justice. Those movements are fueled by the pattern, not vice versa. As a rule of thumb, everything that is sufficiently evil eventually joins up with the pattern. So do many things that aren't originally evil. But here's what, here's what Wayne Marsh says about it, and it's what I'm gonna talk about for sort of the rest of this show. And it's an important distinction. He says the following: inside the pattern is also a flawed self-protection aspect, regardless of hurt to others. Error recognition would expose that and literally could destroy their entire worldview because it's pulling at the threads of their constructed reality. Astronomical fear levels as a consequence of even considering the idea of error. That's why it can be dangerous to shatter people's worldviews without being able to offer a better way forwards that they see is in their self-interest. Literally could get you killed, right? So what he's saying here is that there is a certain level at which if you provide the truth or reality, David Deutsch's version of reality, hard to vary assertions about the truth, if you offer that to some people, right, they will kill you. They will actually kill you, right? Because you're forcing them to go through something that nobody wants to go through. You're forcing people to go through the destruction of their entire worldview, everything they've used that worldview to predict into the future, to have a goal to work towards. You're making them upend all of that, right? It's the same as the difficulty some people would have with divorce, right? It's very breakups are very difficult because it forces you to reanimate a vision of the future that you already had. You'd already built sandcastles in your mind, and now you've got to build them again, right? That's why we call this show The Breakup. This show is called The Breakup for that reason. We are in a relationship with opinions fueled by money that has been around for 100 years and has come to create reality that we think of as just reality, right? But it's not that, right? It's just money. It's money that's fueled these things, and now we're left holding the bag here at the end. So I continue to believe that what they say here is exactly correct, right? It is exactly correct. You can't just use arguments now and say, oh, the hospital wasn't built, the hospital wasn't destroyed, this is all lying, the media lies, change your opinion right now, right? It's not going to be quite enough, right? It's not going to be quite enough. Indeed, these questions are the same in America. The George Floyd thing, the question around Hamas and the hospital and all that, they all look the same. You're getting short-circuited in your ability to argue about it because everyone gets so triggered. So everyone has to go on the periphery and just have conversations about schools, exactly as Vivek said, the mosquito on the tail of the elephant. You can't talk about the elephant in the room. You're just going to talk about the mosquitoes on the tail because they're the only thing that people can really latch on to, because the bigger picture is too crazy for a lot of folks, right? So, that's why that's why this thing is so paralyzing. Now, at the same time, David Deutsch, within all of this context, took time out to go through Mark Andreessen's Techno-Optimist Manifesto the other day. Remember we talked about the Techno-Optimist Manifesto, people still talking about it. In that Techno-Optimist Manifesto, Mark Andreessen says very clearly the way to get people to do something, right? It's love, right? Fear, love, fear, those things work, right? They can work. Love doesn't really scale, right? Fear is not really a thing that's good to work in. And then the other thing is money, right? He comes out and says, in the Techno-Optimist Manifesto, Mark Andreessen says the only way left to us to get people to do things is money, right? Incentivize it, right? So incentivize it. So he comes out and says that. Now, at the same time, you got Schellenberger yesterday, who's come out. So I'm drawing these new proposals that people are coming up with. So you got Mark Andreessen with the Techno-Optimist thing where it's all about money. The next one we had was Schellenberger and a few others, Matt Taibbi, everyone, Barry Weiss, a few others, have come up with the Westminster Declaration. So they were out pushing it yesterday. The Westminster Declaration is all about censorship and freedom of speech and what needs to go on for that, right? So what he says here is that the mainstream media insists that the censorship industrial complex is a conspiracy theory, but it's not. It's real. And now 138 artists, journalists, and public intellectuals from around the world, from left to right, are calling on governments to dismantle it. So it's some of the points in the declaration are: we do not want our children to grow up in a world where they live in fear of speaking their minds. Free speech is our best weapon against disinformation. The fight for free speech goes global. Attacks on free speech have always been a precursor to attacks on other civil liberties. So it's exactly what Vivek is saying, right? Vivek and the Black Lives Matter thing in 2020 are the same because they actually short circuit free speech. They force you into emotional binaries, which incapacitate your ability to have a normal debate and a normal discussion, right? So very destabilizing and powerful forces, right? And then naturally, of course, right, we've got, our favorite Thierry Breton, right? We love Thierry Breton. He's the British guy or the French guy who's always, oh, Elon, we're friends, but I'm just going to censor the shit out of you and put you in jail, right? That guy. He's a space drop candidate, Thierry. We might have to get someone from France, and we might need to drop. The French will probably want one space drop, just because it's gonna seem kind of how many people from your country got dropped from space, right? The French are gonna be like, oh, we had no one to cheer for it. It's like, how some people cheer for them to have astronauts from their own country, and that was a thing, right? It's gonna be the inverse of that, right? But the same idea, right? We didn't get anyone to drop from space. The first girl dropped from space, right? It's going to be all that. We should actually even test it out with, Joe Biden's dog, Commander, the one that bites everyone, that they're going to have to put down anyway. Commander the dog, who's biting everyone. You guys heard about that? Joe Biden had a dog in the White House, but it's such a bad dog that he bit everyone, so they had to get rid of him. So Commander the dog should probably go first, just to test it the way they used to put the animals in first to test the space drop technology. So we should probably drop Commander first. Not yet; it's going to come, but Commander's got to go. So and by the way, we'll talk about Biden in a second because it's so good. So of course the folks in Europe are naturally trying to fast track censorship because something terrorism. Why bother thinking it through, right? So he's now trying to go after Musk again. Mike Ben's bringing up all the relevant information here, talking about imagine having the balls to build a for-profit censorship product, then saying Congress is going to have to force the internet companies to use it, right? So this is NewsGuard, this is Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales, and all those people. Think about how sick that is. They push laws imposing censorship on platforms while building a massive model selling censorship compliance services to the now captive platforms. So that's what is happening to Elon, and the reason why it's happening right now is because indeed these wars are in danger of falling apart because of the conversations around them. So when you go back to what the fella said about Wayne Marsh, what he said about all the censorship and the inability to just argue with this stuff and get people to say if they're wrong or admit they're wrong or change their opinions, that if you don't actually offer a better way forward, if you don't actually give an entire worldview in the conversation, you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, what I'm going to say is we are so close to getting it. We are so close to getting it. And it comes from this idea here. So listen to what War Clandestine says, right? He's saying the following. The global situation can only be resolved by the commander-in-chief. Our only hope is Trump returning to the Oval Office and shutting the whole operation down, ending the conflict in Ukraine, the Middle East, and potentially Taiwan. The stage is being set for Trump to be the global peacemaker. If Trump is able to come in and put a stop to World War III, as he claims he can, surely the world will not only support Trump, but will see how the corrupt Biden regime could have prevented global conflict and chose not to. While the world may look to be on the brink of destruction, there is an avenue here to win over the hearts and minds of the people and then use the political ammunition to public support to hold the deep state accountable. The only question now is, can we make it to November 2024 before the world collapses? And I think that is exactly right. I don't think there's any chance now that Trump doesn't at least win or else RFK wins, and I'll explain. So you get Beauty on here, right? Commenting on something that RFK said. So RFK came out yesterday and said reparations are on the board, right? So Beauty on says a complete idiot, unelectable, delusional, innumerate, and unethical. No real Bitcoiner can be for this entitled, ignorant, stopped clock upstart, because in a world where Bitcoin is the only money, reparations are impossible. Beauty on made one mistake in that he didn't go into the actual text, right? So they're not talking about cash payments, right? Not talking about cash payments, which everyone dismisses and confuses instantly when you talk about reparations, right? So he comes out in favor of reparations just yesterday, and he says the following, right? That he's not talking about direct cash payments, right? He's saying that these federal dollars will be used to rebuild Black infrastructures like banks and businesses, and as well as to direct redress payments or tax credits rather than no strings attached cash giveaways. So remember, if anyone tells you about reparations, right, just remember the following. No one credible, nobody credible is saying direct cash payments. This is not the, what was his name again? The comedian Dave Chappelle, Black reparations skit. You guys ever see that one? The richest man in the world on a good hand of dice, right? KFC and Fubu joined to make the largest company in the world. So it's not what we're talking about, right? What he's saying here is more or less like better education, better finance systems. It's really just something, and I continue to believe this. I think that whatever ends up coming up as reparations for historical slavery ought to be something like a better education system, that everyone in the country can use. It's for everybody, right? It's like, here's what happened to African American people 200 years ago, and here are the consequences today. This system, which helps repair some of the damage to the education system, is actually available to everyone in the world, right? It's almost like the African American community, in getting some form of reparation, is also giving a gift to the world, right? And that's the kind of way that a lot of people would be able to be totally okay with this, right? I mean, completely okay. I'm okay with it, right? I would have no problems with whatever system is decided, that's creative and isn't direct cash payments, is systemic. Something like Black Wall Street being reconstituted. Now, I'm not even saying it's seed capital or anything like that. On a Bitcoin center, there's entirely new ways you can do this, right? All kinds of systems could be used to help repair this stuff. So now, I don't even care about the policy, right? I'm not even here to argue reparations. It's something personally I don't mind, as long as it's done this way. I, in fact, would embrace it. What I think is happening here is exactly what we were talking about yesterday. The NBC News has come out and said, oh, this new poll shows RFK is stealing all these votes from Trump. He's going to make Trump unelectable. Trump's down 10 points since RFK got in the race, right? It's all people going over there. Remember, that's NPC News telling you that, right? Why would NPC News be like, oh shit, Trump's losing? Because they know the truth, right? They know the truth. They know what's actually happening. You had yesterday RFK also saying if Republicans and Democrats send him an anti-assault rifle bill or whatever, he'd sign it, right? But it's fake. No one's sending him that bill, right? It's easy. RFK is directly targeting the left right now. He's not targeting Trump, nothing like that. We are in a world where RFK either wins outright. What I'm not saying he's going to, right? But the path is still there. The path is more there than ever. More than ever, it's there, right? But more likely what is going to happen is RFK decides who the president is. RFK himself decides. There's only one person in America who matters for the presidency right now. There's only one. There's one voter. There is one voter for president. Believe it or not, we have one person whose vote matters more than anyone else in America right now. And that's RFK Jr.'s vote. RFK Jr., with these policies in place, decides who the president is. There's no doubt he's attacking the left flank of Joe Biden. There's no doubt in my mind he's attacking it, right? And that's why NPC News is trying to tell you that, oh, no, it's not going to happen, right? No, it's actually, he's stealing votes from Trump, right? NBC News has gotten everything wrong forever, right? They fell for every hoax. They fell for every lie. They perpetrated every one of the lies as well. They're not credible. If they're coming out at this time in the juncture and telling you, oh, yeah, it's Trump, it's the opposite. It's obviously the opposite, right? It's an outlier poll. There's one poll out there that says this is happening, right? One poll. Of course it's theirs. Now, he's obviously going to take some votes from Trump, obviously, right? But if he's out there doing reparations talk, he's going to get a lot more votes from the Democrats. And if that happens, right, if you have what we're all hoping for and what we all think is possible, you're getting a situation where RFK can decide if Trump is president or not. Now, I continue to believe that one of the best things RFK could do in this situation would be to negotiate. So all that vice president stuff, that's not going to work, right? I've heard from enough people that they just don't get along as people, right? The RFK and Trump, and it's never going to work. But one thing that would be great is if RFK got his daddy's old job back, right? So imagine this. Imagine RFK decides who the president is, depending on whether he stays or goes. It doesn't matter which person he's stealing votes from. In the case that he decides who's president, it's just looking at which one of his actions, staying or going, would make Biden or Trump win, and that's the action he takes. So that's why he decides who the leader is. So what would be in it for Kennedy if he let Trump win, right? Well, one of the best deals out there is if Trump's going to be space dropping people and you know, going after the people that have him currently with capital punishment offenses in Georgia, right? He's got capital punishment on the docket here, guys. You know that, right? Like Trump has actual capital punishment charges on him. I'm not sure if it's electric chair in Georgia or the needle, or I don't know how they do it in Georgia, but that's what he's got. So, you know, you got Trump, who's got capital punishment charges against him today. It's not hypothetical, right? Of course he's going to kill the people on the other side. Now, it gets messy if a Republican kills a Republican. But if you hire a Democrat to be your AG, which is Bobby Kennedy's daddy's job, you clean it up, right? It's bipartisan space drops. We need bipartisan space drops. We don't want one uniparty space drops are not what we want. We want bipartisan approval of space drops. It's the only way, right? So you could probably trust the legal mind of RFK to go do this, right? And it's possible. But that's not, the space drops aren't really what we're talking about. It goes back again to what the fella said about worldviews being changed and why it's so important. So put the two thoughts together that War Clandestine said, right? We got to survive until 2024. And I think that's true. I think War Clandestine has it exactly correct. We got to survive. It's not necessarily going to be that easy. If we do, and Trump wins with RFK's help, right? The situation America finds itself in will not be the same as when Trump said in 2019 he's not a fan, right? You're having people openly bet against American dollars. You're having markets open up worldwide. You had Putin at Xi's house yesterday. Xi looks like he loves Putin. You know how Xi looks every time you see him in every other interview? He looks like bored. You ever see him meet the Canadian Prime Minister? He's like, get the fuck out of here. That's the best, right? Just beat it, you stupid idiot. He looks like he genuinely likes Putin, right? It looks like they genuinely have chemistry. They get along. He was honored yesterday. We're seeing all these countries. We're just talking about the inability of the sanctions to actually work, right? So go back to the worldview question, right? If you destroy someone's worldview and try and replace it, you're going to get anger. You could die, right? You could actually die. If you reprogram someone too abruptly, they will kill you first before they do the work of changing their worldview. But you need a scapegoat. You need a fake reason for people to let go of their fake brainwashing, right? And the good news is blaming it all on a corrupt money system is one of the best things. And that's why Joe Biden's performance this week in Israel is just perfect. I mean, it couldn't be better. Like, the more I look at everything being played out right now, the more this does look like a simulation, like a movie, right? You get this guy who is falling asleep on stage, who it looks like elder abuse. It looks exactly as it is. It looks like someone is pulling the strings. He has absolutely zero cognitive function. There's nothing there, right? I don't think he makes it to 2024. Like that's where we're at. I don't think he can even put a sentence together. Remember what I said was the greatest punishment for him winning that election and just having him up there try to do the job, right? That does require a certain amount of cognitive ability. He doesn't have it, right? So in the end, with all of his money laundering that we've seen in 4K, we've seen it in HD 4K, right? There is no doubt about the Biden crime family now. There's no doubt about it. You take this Biden crime family and the truth about it, and the truth about the money laundering systems around the world, the information laundering systems around the world, you can actually give people the fake reason, the fake because to understand and get rid of all this stuff, you can blame it on the money. You can blame it on unlimited money, which allowed for this to happen. Now, if you put Trump in that position where he has got this weapon to destroy any memory of the Bidens and their legacy, to completely flip it so that he's the peacemaker taking over from the crooked warmongering parasites, right? You need a way to get people there. It's not just I'm a hero and things like that, right? You need a cognitive closure reason that helps people understand that their own survival will be better off for it. Their own survival. There's reasons why they must listen to this. It's going to be this idea of you were tricked because they use the money to trick you, right? So the idea of having one of these confusing opinions is going to be tied to the money. The follow the money argument is going to become the most important thing we see next year. And I believe that just like we have to survive till 2024, Trump's opinions from a few years ago of being the US trash token spokesperson, which I thought was fatal, very bad news, or at least delayed Bitcoin's inevitability. And I'm not necessarily a Bitcoin is inevitable person, right? I see all kinds of ways this won't work out. But if I stop and say, Trump, in order to use his world-class persuasion abilities, right? The world champion of persuasion, he'll have one opportunity to get people to keep their dignity, that people that hated him, to keep their dignity, blame it on the money, which is easy. Most people are ready to do that, right? Blame the banks, blame the money, blame the politicians. Trump's going to be able to do that. And he's going to be able to use any one of these images of Joe Biden not being able to talk to help push his point. So I think we're close to Trump being a fan of Bitcoin. And if Trump is a fan of Bitcoin, it's over. It's over. The way I see it, he's got one opportunity to totally take out the opposition, and it's going to be to blame the money, blame the financial system, blame all of that. He's financially literate enough and practical enough to understand the opposite, and he's going to have to embrace it. I think he will, right? He is a massive real estate genius. His super cities, Trump cities, are one of the best things. He's going to understand the energy relationship between Bitcoin and nuclear energy. And I think he is one of the boomers that can actually figure this stuff out. So I say, let's go. It's going to be great. We're almost there, guys. It's not fun, but we're almost there. We are almost there. All right. So now my mouse might be charged. Let me see how much it charged that whole show. It doesn't even charge fast. Yeah, 67%. What a piece of shit. All right. I missed all of these comments today. Looks like side chick rather than ex. Israel is the wife. A side chick, yeah. Try paper towels. Oh yeah, I almost used a paper towel. I have paper towels. I worry about the bleach in them though, because I don't even use white, like bleached coffee filters. Yeah, thanks, T-Dog. I had it in my hand. I almost used it. The physical filter worked. It's a little muddy. Yeah. I can take another sip though. A little bitter. That's okay. Good morning, Breakup Gang. Bitcoin is our winning play all day. Love it. Rhyming, very important. Morning, brilliant people. Yeah, love it, guys. Migrants are basically child support. What a father, BF, and husband the USA must be. So good. Madame Lagarde is late to the game. Yeah, the Golden Girls of Fiat. I'm going to remember that one. The Golden Girls of Fiat. We're going to use that. There we go. Should we start calling them poverty targets instead of calamity one? So good. Morning, Bitcoiners. Canadians against global warming. Polar ice cap could cover 98% of the territory. Felipe, I've told you a few times, they're really, really not smart. Nolan, I might, Justin, Jeffy, let me tell you something. I was in Barcelona for case 1, got out. I got back to New York for official case 1, which was traced to my building, my office building. And then I got back to Canada for their first cases because they didn't really have any until the summer. And then Barbados had 0. And I ran away from Canada because of the mask stuff and the crazy restrictions. And I went to Barbados for their first case. So I'm multiple patient zeros around the world. I swear I had COVID in Christmas. Yeah, it was around HODLT, 100%. It was all around New York City by then. You know, we just have such high traffic between China and New York that it was totally inevitable. And as I understand, the Chinese sent people around the world to make sure we all got it. Right. Good morning, everyone. But that's just totally, I dropped my phone on the toilet. Ooh, but it's still it's Johnny. Very good. Truth and dangers of hypnotized masses. Yeah. Fiat is the ex-girlfriend that won't leave you alone. Absolutely. That's exactly what it is, guys. It's just this really desperate, needy ex-girlfriend, right? The not so subtle chin rub. Bad dog. That's Commander. Drop Commander from space. Let's see how it goes. Maybe Commander is only biting bad people. Any concerns about RFK's proposal to cap mortgages? No, because real estate's a shitcoin. So it always was. It's a complete and total shitcoin. No one should be paying what they're paying for stuff in the United States for real estate. And I mean, Canada, why in the fuck would anyone in Canada pay in a country this big with 10 million square kilometers with like 55 people to be near Toronto or something stupid? Forget it. Dumb. So it's a shitcoin. I mean, we're not in a real credible financial system. So if he's saying, oh, I'm going to do more fantasy stuff, so what? It's a no-lose situation for him, right? There's other ways to make housing affordable, and I think Trump's method is the best one. The Freedom Cities Citadel model is what we got to do. We got to build new cities. New York is not coming back. It's not coming back. It's a shithole. You can't rebuild it. I know a lot of, oh, it's coming back. I don't know. I think the world's going to change enough. I hope it turns into something like my real thoughts on New York City during that 1 month shutdown, or not 1 month shutdown, but that 1 month when it was quiet, was, they call it the city that never sleeps, right? I believe that was the first time ever where New York had a break. All those European cities got destroyed, bombed down to nothing. That was break time. Like, it's not like London was hopping in the 40s after it was destroyed by the Nazis. They had to rebuild the damn thing, right? New York needs a period where it rebuilds, and then it can just become like an old European city, like a little toned down, not as crowded, not as crazy. Because the truth about New York is that it was still in the 19th century, right? If you went below, like, I know we built a new train here in Montreal, right? And it's the most amazing and beautiful thing you've seen for trains. And it makes a little bit of noise. The thing is heavy, and it goes along a concrete track, right? A concrete base. And it makes like the smallest noise. But of course, Montrealers, oh, it's barbaric, oh, how can anyone live? Go to the Manhattan Bridge and listen to the trains cross that thing. You could be, you could be at the base and still far away from the Manhattan Bridge, and the noise, it gets into your teeth, it gets into your brain. If you own any one of those houses next to the Manhattan Bridge in Manhattan, kill yourself. It's worth nothing. I couldn't spend a half an hour there. I go to the park because the park is awesome with kids, and I used to bring my kids there all the time. I'd have to move on to the next park at a certain time because I could not handle the noise. New York City is like that everywhere. Noisy, loud, shitty, dripping, wet, ugly, dirty. It's still a 19th century city. It needs to be modernized. I can still remember when one of my New York friends, we went to Singapore for the first time, and he's like, oh, my doctor told me I had to get a shot. And I was like, he told you had to get a shot? No. You are going to the civilized world. This is not like I'm a New Yorker and I'm going to some third world place. It's the other way around. You don't need a shot. They need them coming here. We don't need a shot going to Singapore. What are you talking about? So Americans and New York needs this sort of change. I could see New York getting completely rebuilt and being an amazing place again. But the truth is, it was a city from the 19th century that reached its apex in the 20th century as a fiat, no time, everyone busy. And it'll be the perfect memory, the perfect time capsule for the fiat world, but it will change, and it will be something completely different next. And I hope it becomes more like a chill city. It doesn't need to be the wild place that it was. I mean, the world loses something. I loved that type of New York City. But, I always describe New York City as just planet Earth as it is, right? Not like Toronto. They got multiculturalism, but they have all their teeth and a dog and a condo and no kids. And that's the kind of immigrants we get in Canada, right? Fine people. Great, right? But in New York, it's just toothless, uneducated, like just wild, which is what is good too. It's just planet Earth. It's warts and all. Planet Earth, warts and all, is New York City. The whole thing crunched down to this little urban landscape with the good and the bad. And so the world will change in a Bitcoin standard. So New York will change because it's a reflection of the world. It'll just be a completely different scenario, which I greatly look forward to. So our RFK's thing, 3% mortgages, to me, we got to, like, people who aren't prepared for a Bitcoin standard are the people who still think that their house value is like part of their net worth. It's not. It's a shitcoin, right? I've seen, I've lost money off things that weren't margin trading too. Stocks going down. It's the same thing, right? So psychologically, that's going to be a tough thing for a lot of people. But I don't care if he makes mortgages 3%. The whole thing's distorted anyway. Who gives a shit, right? It's not going anywhere. So G likes leaders who are actual men. Yeah. But guys, I don't know if Putin goes down as a hero in this story either, right? What is this? The reparations. Fracture going for Trump. Intending to fracture growing black support for Trump. Robert. Yeah. So again, this will not affect Trump. I see it the other way around. I see this as like direct way for Democrats to not bother. And again, it doesn't matter if he gets enough Trump support and he drops out, that goes back to Trump, right? Which is another way he chooses. So any article out there that shows that this is designed to peel from Trump is not correct. It's part of the NBC. Oh, look, he's getting votes from Trump. It's not true, right? If only NBC News is saying it, you know what to do with that information. It's very suspicious. So I think Trump keeps his black. I mean, the people who support Trump for on the African American side, it's not because he's like, it's not policy, right? Did you guys hear the Latinos for Trump song? Fuck Joe Biden, I'm voting for Trump. Fuck Joe Biden, I'm voting for Trump. Then they hit him with the RICO. So good, right? He's going to get more of those. So I'd say that a lot of the people who like Trump, it's for all the reasons we like him. It's like exhilarating, right? You don't get the same exhilaration from Kennedy, although there is a different exhilaration altogether. I just continue to think that the credentialist world that loves Biden will go for this before, and any one of these policies to me seems more like, it's not like there were people who were like, oh, Trump's going to give reparations. Oh, but now that's the real thing I wanted. I was almost a Trump Republican, but the reparations factor wasn't there. So I think it'll be fine. We'll see. The U.S. empire. Yeah, why wouldn't they be happy? Yeah. The super spreader of disease and orange pills. Yeah, that's what we want. Hey, Nolan. You're good. You're here. You mentioned how BTC will fail. Pray, tell, please. Like in 100 years or currently? I mean, it could fail with the brainwashing now, right? Or severe market manipulations. I just say it. It's good to use your an uncertainty, like almost like a suffix, like punctuation, right? Maybe I'm wrong. You should think of that as punctuation. So especially in Bitcoin, right? When we say the inevitability argument, it's a dangerous one, right? It is not inevitable. I can see it getting wound up and having a gravitational force of its own, Bitcoin, hyper Bitcoinization for sure, right? But that's not the same as inevitability. I think the chances are really high. I think it's like at this point, we're more likely to have hyper Bitcoinization than not. But in order to protect yourself against cognitive dissonance and to keep your head about you in this difficult time, you've always got to add as punctuation. I could be wrong, right? There are a lot of Bitcoiners that would be more clear-minded right now had they added that to their Bitcoin, daily affirmations. It doesn't mean you have to even mean it. It's just an important thing to say to make sure you're still dexterous and you have some neuroplasticity around Bitcoin. I don't really believe it, right? Now, in my book, I did come up with a way to destroy Bitcoin in 100 years, but it requires science fiction type breakthroughs. We're not there, right? But the hint is synthetic wombs, right? You can actually replace money with owning human life and slavery. Slavery is the only thing that can really destroy Bitcoin. If you can own human beings again, I think that would do it. Everyone in New York City is moving out to the suburbs and destroying their beauty now. I mean, they're pretty big, right? The Adirondacks are, I mean, we got enough space. I think we'll be fine. They can move up further to Canada and we got even more space. So we want that. One of the things I want either Trump or Kennedy to do is to relax the northern border because it's stupid. The Americans already control every port of entry into Canada. So like when I travel from Canada to the United States, I go through immigration in Canada to the United States. I don't like, so that means I fly into the domestic network in the United States, just so you understand, right? Like when I get off a plane in New York City, I get off as an American domestic traveler would. I don't go through any passport stuff in America. It's all done in Canada. This was something that I actually was involved in constituting in Canada. Now, it wasn't me by any stretch, but I was involved in the process. When Stephen Harper, a Bitcoiner, the previous prime minister before Harper, was working with Obama, they wanted to lessen the border friction. And the first step was allowing US customs to operate out of Canada. Now, when I worked for the Minister of Immigration, I did all this refugee stuff and immigration law. I understood very quickly that Canada and the United States, our passports are the same, right? They're the same technology inside. The color of the passport is the same, just like European passports share a color and other countries share continents, share colors. The American and US passports are integrated. And the information system that we use for our immigration is also integrated. So when a Canadian border official writes notes on entry or exit, the system of note-taking is the one the Americans and Canadians use. There are other ones in the rest of the world, but we are almost entirely integrated in our immigration systems in Canada and the United States. So my idea would be that because Americans already know everyone who's in Canada, it's very easy to understand who's in the United States. You just assume they all are. And so they could do that. And that would mean that the northern border on the American side, at least, could become automated or at least very easy to cross. It is already very easy to cross, but I mean, not even any human beings there is what I'm after. I'm after for like a complete old fashioned, no friction, just like Europe, go across the border. I don't know if they could do it the other way around. I think Canada would have to keep its border processing open because we don't know what's happening on the United States side, especially the southern border. So no one knows about that. I don't think they would want to give that up. But who cares about the Canadian side and checking your stuff? The American side needs to save the money and spend it in other places. So that's one of the things I'm asking for in this campaign. So we'll get it. We'll get it. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I shall see you all later. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. All right. We had a pretty interesting couple of days. And again, I think all Trump needs to do, just like his attack on Bitcoin was the most effective I've ever seen. I'm not a fan is amazing as an attack on Bitcoin. It's amazing, right? You don't even want to see it. It's so good. Even when I saw it, I was like, fuck, like that. How do you punch back against that? How? Like, I am a fan. Who cares, right? So Trump didn't fall into the stupid argument point of view. He's not a fan, right? There was nothing ever like it's dismissive. It's a backhand bitch slap to the face. It's terrible, right? We didn't like that. Now it wasn't fatal, but it was like I said, it was a solid hit, and I'd never seen Bitcoin take a real hit before. He made contact. Now Bitcoin's fine. Honey Badger totally fine. There's stuff we learned, there's stuff we saw, but it will come back. And if Trump merely understands the reality of the situation, if he understands what RFK is doing, if he sees the situation the dollar's been put in by the money launderers, could you think of a better person to wrap up the excuse everyone needs to get rid of American corruption by tying it with money and the Bidens? The performance Biden just put on in the Middle East was perfect. Again, I've never been so happy to see this person as president. It's the presidency always seems to get the right person at the right time for the job, and Joe Biden is that. He is the right person at the right time for the job. I said it before he was elected, right? I've mentioned many times. a fanatic Trump 2015 supporter, never stopped supporting him. Loved him right through 2020. Of course, I thought the whole 2020 thing was heartbreaking to me. It was heartbreaking to watch elections and disinformation. And of course, deep down, I wanted Trump to win, of course, right? But I was saying, well, what's better for me, right? As a Bitcoiner, the exact scenario we got, an election with no credibility, and this guy wins, and he's now got to go do the job. It's the best. It's the best. I will vote 5 times for him to do it again, right? Just like I did last time. All right, that's what I got. Peace, everyone. See you tomorrow.